on the top of the blank page of number 19, page 19, I want you to write 3 little statements. The first one is, a Christian who is depressed feels, F-E-E-L-S, and then just put a blank there. A Christian who is depressed feels blank, and that blank is there for you to answer in time to come. Number 2, a Christian who is depressed believes blank. And number 3, a Christian who is depressed needs, N-E-E-D-S, and then a blank. I will challenge you that the way that you answer those 3 questions will tell you much about your perception of depression, and also perhaps may be extremely accurate or could be totally off base in regard to someone that is clinically depressed. According to recent surveys and research that I did before I left town this past week, the most prominent symptoms of major depression, when we talk about major depression, we are not talking about the blues or just a bad day every now and then. We are talking about clinical, diagnosable depression. The most prominent symptoms of major depression are a severe and profound and persistent low mood, extreme sadness, or a sense of despair. Low mood, profound sadness, or a sense of despair. A major depressive episode is a period of time characterized by symptoms of major depression. In other words, people that are depressed have depression-type moods. Psychiatrists, psychologists, others who deal with clinical depression use as their text of choice what is now called the DSM-4. It's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, published by, of course, the American Psychiatric Association. It's called the DSM-5 now because in 2013 they updated the earlier edition, so now it's the DSM-5. But this is what they say about a major depressive episode. It experiences a depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure, and notice these, in daily activities, accompanied by problems with sleeping, eating, energy, concentration, or self-worth for 2 weeks or longer. Clinical depression is something that just doesn't happen today and then it's gone. It is something that continues for at least 2 weeks in duration. Thus, the reason that it's diagnosed by the DSM-5 and by doctors and by psychiatrists and psychologists. They go on to say, sudden losses or changes can exacerbate pre-existing symptoms of depression or anxiety. Depression affects people by changing their level of functioning in many areas of their lives. And now they're going to tell us what those areas are. Namely, people's sleep, their appetite, their concentration, their mood, their energy level, their physical health, and social lives can change dramatically due to the symptoms of depression. Sleep habits, eating habits, able to function cognitively, think clearly, energy to be able to get up, go, and do. Their physical health begins to wane, and it affects also their socialization with other individuals that change dramatically due to, of course, symptoms of depression. Often people who struggle with depression will describe having difficulty getting out of bed, having little or no motivation, or energy to do the things that they typically do, and feeling irritable or very sad. All of these different things make living life much harder. So what we're talking about is something that affects the way we look at ourselves, our environment, our life, our families, and yes, even our church. Because depression does not pick and choose and say, okay, I'll take a vacation for a period of time. It is something that's a whole body experience, and I believe the notes that you have on pages 19 and 21 will suggest that. We're not talking about having a blue day or a blue Monday every now and then. We're talking about something that is persistent, that's continuous, that continues to exacerbate a person's outlook on life and the way they look at things and the way they view things and the way they are less likely to be able to accomplish things of life. Now, before we continue, I want to give just a little bit of understanding about grief and depression, because a lot of times we get confused by that. Someone wrote this, and it's just one sentence. You might want to write it down because it's a good sentence to understand. Grief is depression in proportion to circumstance. Grief is depression in proportion to circumstance. In other words, I don't feel good because I have lost something or someone significant to me. That's the circumstance, and therefore I am depressed in that regard to that extent, in regard to my grief. But then this individual continues on. Depression is grief out of proportion to circumstance. Depression is grief out of proportion to circumstance. Depression is, I don't know whether this world will ever get any better for me. Depression is, I don't know whether I'm worth anything to anyone anymore. Depression is, I have suffered far more losses than I could ever imagine, and pretty much everywhere they look, they see depression. Let me read 3 statements for you. I don't want to see anybody. What's the point? No one really wants to see me anyway, and why should they? I am so miserable. Sometimes I just want to sit and cry. Dan, what did you hear from those 3 statements? I don't want to see anybody. What's the point? No one really wants to see me anyway. Why should they? I'm so miserable. Sometimes I just want to sit and cry. What do you hear from that?
Life's tumbled in and there's no hope.
Life is tumbled in. There's no hope. There's no change, a possibility of hope. And I'm not much good anyway. That's what depression is. Now, again, we all have episodes of depression. We all have times in which we're sad about something that has happened to us that hopefully is significant. And so the point of the matter is, episodes of depression are just that. They have a beginning, they have a quick end, and then you go on. But clinical depression, DSM-5, says at least 2 weeks in duration of that kind of activity that we mentioned a few moments ago. Someone has described depression as a feeling of lethargy, sort of just like having the flu. Ache, body, mind, just don't feel good. Others describe depression as being like stuck in a dark tunnel, in a black pit, or seeing the world through dark glasses. Now, here's the difference, again, one more time. Here's the difference between depression and sadness, sadness caused by grief. Depression is a state of emotionally being blocked, of feeling dead inside. No hope, or at least very little hope. Whereas sadness is a deep, rich emotion that even though it hurts, makes us feel alive, makes us feel real, makes us realize, oh, that hurts. Now what can I do about it? And then you do something about it. You see the difference? Depression is, I don't know what to do. I don't care what I do. No one else cares what I do. I'm stuck. Sadness, grief, man, this hurts. Man, their loss to me means so much. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do about it. But then, you know what? They'd want me to do better. They would want me to try. I'm going to go talk to my minister. I'm going to go talk to my church friend. I'm going to go talk to one of the elders. Maybe they can give me some ideas. See the difference? It's coming to the realization, and it may take a little while to do so, but it's coming to the realization, I can do something about that. Over here, I don't have the energy to do anything about it. The problem with depression is that it's a very complex phenomenon, psychologically and biologically. The mood itself is a loss of pleasure of life. I remember this in my master's degree program several years ago of counseling. The professor said, imagine that there's someone that you respect or that you used to respect that is inside your head 24/7, and all they are doing is telling you how bad you are. And it's a continual cycle. It never ends. That is what depression is. It's a constant phenomenon of you're no good, the world's no good, there's no hope. I like history. So, of course, I went back and said, okay, let's find out where all this came from. Before the 1960s, we just called it blue days or foggy minds. But in 1960, a guy by the name of Aaron T. Beck, B-E-C-K, pioneered this modern understanding of depression. He demonstrated that depression was characterized by thought patterns that actually maintain the depressive mood. Now, let me put that in layman terms. That just means I don't feel very good, and you know what? I don't feel good today. I'm not going to feel good tomorrow, and I can't even think about what I'm going to feel like 2 days from now. See the point? Depressed ideas that continue a vicious cycle. That's what depression is. And you can't break that cycle. You can't get that person out of your head saying those terrible negative things about you. And we receive that from all kinds of stimuli today in our world. Yes, social media is a blessing. Folks, social media is also a curse. And we've got to be sure that we understand the difference. And we've got to be sure that we take the garbage and we do what you need to do with garbage, and that is throw it out. And use it for the good things that it can do, but we don't need to dwell on the garbage, because after a while we're going to start stinking. We really are. And I'm not just talking to these beautiful and handsome-looking teenagers you have down front. I'm talking about the rest of us as well. Because I'm afraid, unless you folks in Florida are different from the folks in Alabama, we got some folks that just, some of their posts, it's just full of garbage in regard to some of the things, the comments that they make. So Beck said, here's the way it works. We first start out with negative thoughts about self. Self-criticism. I am no good. I don't know how to do anything right. I can't make a good grade on this test. I can't do the job that they have given me to do. I don't have the ability. I don't have the talent. I'm just a fake. I'm just a fraud. It's all about self-criticism. And guess what? The world will be glad to applaud and to help you feel that way. They really will. So first, it's self-criticism. I am no good. Secondly, it's negative thoughts about the world. General negativity. Yeah. And I don't want to get political here. Yeah. We did those things in Afghanistan all those years, and now we're just letting them take over, and it's going to come back to bite us. And this world is going to be this way for the rest of existence of this world. We're going to have problem after problem after problem. In other words, the whole world is bad. Okay? General negativity, which leads to, first of all, negative thoughts about self-criticism, negative thoughts about the world, general negativity, which leads to negative thoughts about the future. Hopelessness. You see the progression? You see the way it works? I'm no good. The world's no good. Nothing will ever change. So why should I be in it? Unless you want to be frightened and shocked and dismayed, do not go and look at the 2020 and then the early months of 2021 in regard to suicide rates in America from COVID. They are shocking. I did not even want to show that or look at it. And yeah, I told you about it. But they're shocking. And and it's not just age specific, it's across the board. So we're dealing with something that is debilitating in every kind of way. Think about that for just a moment. Negative thoughts about self. How is it in our world today that we receive messages in all kinds of ways, and I'm not just talking about social media here, that people are no good? How's that happen? What about religious values? What about moral stances? What about people that stand up for the truth of God's Word? Are the folks on the outside applauding us? Probably not. Are the folks that disagree with us saying, well, that's your opinion and we have our opinion and we can all live together in harmony? Probably not. They want to do away with that. They want to just write that off the history walls and start again with a brand new world where everybody can do anything they want to do without any kind of consequences at all. Self-criticism. And then you look at the world and it's really easy to get depressed. Think about it. It really is. Do not raise your hands. But how many of you seriously from different times in your life in regard to things that you're facing literally make a decision? You know, today I am not going to go to social media. Today I am not going to read a newspaper. Today I am not going to turn on the television set or cable system to find out what happened in the world today. Am I the only crazy person that has done that from time to time? Because quite frankly, dealing with whatever it is that I was dealing with or that my church was dealing with or that some friend or loved one was dealing with, I didn't need any more problems. I didn't need to know or even what the stock market did. Okay, it's just money and I'm not going to take it with me when this life is over anyway. You see the point? It's easy to get negative about the world, which then leads to that third and final situation. There is no hope. And folks, you know what? That is true without Jesus Christ. Without the church. Without good and caring moms and dads and sons and daughters and grandparents and church folks that will stand up with you and declare and say, there is hope. And we're here and we're going to love you and we're going to be patient with you and we're going to see you through. In my graduate class several years ago, one of the professors said these words, and if David wants to make a copy of this for the church to have, that's fine, because it's a little bit longer. In order for a person to be physically and mentally healthy, they need 5 things. A person needs to feel wanted. A person needs to feel needed. A person needs to feel useful. A person needs to feel loved. And a person needs to feel appreciated. We need to feel wanted, we need to feel needed, we need to feel useful, we need to feel loved, and we need to feel appreciated if we want to be physically and mentally healthy. And now this. If someone lacks 2 of those 5 things in their life on a continual basis, they not only will not feel well, but they possibly will begin to face depression. And it doesn't matter whether it's a kindergartner a first grade, a fifth grader, a 12th grader, a young person in college, a married man or woman, or a grandmom or a granddad. Brethren, we all need those 5 things. And if you think about it, where is the best place in this world, literally, to feel wanted, needed, useful, loved, and appreciated? I believe you know the answer: the Lord's church. And I believe I can make a biblical case for that with all kinds of scriptures. We need that. We want that. And again, in and through Jesus Christ, we can have that. And that's why it's so important that we understand that when you're dealing with something that is as real as depression is, clinical depression is, that's where people are hurting. That's where we need to go to. We need to look at whether they consider themselves to be useful, whether they consider themselves to be appreciated, whether they need to be, that they're wanted, that they're loved, and that they're really needed. You know, in your outline, page 19 to 21, you have, several years ago, someone asked me, okay, Ron, through your program, tell us what we, and initially this was, tell us what we as preachers need to know about depression. And as I was going through this list and making the notes for page 19 and page 20, it dawned on me, this is exactly what Christians need. Doesn't matter whether it's deacons or elders or preachers, it's something that all of us need. We need to know about these things. And what's important is that we, as the statistics say, depression can be dealt with. Now, medication and treatment and counseling doesn't take care of all the problems. And if you're dealing with clinical depression today, I am not trying to minimize your situation. Because I know that it cannot, that doesn't always take care of things. But it's a good start. And with God's help and with others caring for you, then you can be helpful and you can be helped in that regard. Let's be careful as Christians to not become so-called or self-acclaimed psychiatrists and psychologists. Let's be careful about that. Because, reading, I'm dating myself and I'm even down. Do they still, ladies, make the Ladies' Day, is it Red Book? Do they still make that magazine? I don't know. Or reading the Reader's Digest and reading something about depression does not make you an expert on depression. Okay, that's the point I'm trying to make. We've got to be careful that we don't, okay, you're dealing with depression. Well, let me do something for you, or let me hand you something. That doesn't work, particularly with someone that's clinically depressed. On page 21, you have what I consider to be one of my favorite, most prized articles that I ever read, written by our dear friend and our beloved Dr. Dal Flatt, who was clinically depressed and dealt and suffered with bipolar disorder. So the next time when you're wanting to look at and deal with something dealing with depression, you might want to read the things that Brother Flatt said, because it might take away some of the comments that we make toward our fellow church members in a flippant kind of way. that will not only upset them, but even worse, it'll just make them that more depressed. Because you've handed me a scripture, or you've given me a little book, or you've told me to suck it up, or whatever it is that you've done, and you're trying to put a Band-Aid on a huge wound that is my entire body. Because again, as the notes suggest, depression is a whole body experience. It affects everything the way, it affects our thinking, it affects our living, it affects our pleasure, it affects, and it's not just young or old. The statistics are, and I believe they're in your notes. Women, unfortunately, you have the more likelihood to be depressed than men will. They don't know all the answers. I am tempted to say that you are dealing with more depression because you have to deal with men. But I can't prove that. But that might be a real good reason. But you do. You have twice as much the possibility of dealing with clinical depression as a man does. And then there are certain races that have more susceptibility to depression than others. And so that's an issue to deal with. And then there's the biologic situation. Then there's the genetic situation to deal with. There's the circumstances of one's life that you have to look at. Are you getting the idea that depression is a pretty tough cookie to deal with? It is. It really is. How much time we got? 5 minutes. What? 9 minutes. Okay, that sounded bad. Why didn't you say 9 minutes the other night when you said I had 3 minutes? I can't believe you. Okay. So let's just what comments or even questions that someone have? Realizing that I am not a psychiatrist or psychologist, okay, I'm not. But if anyone have comments or questions that they'd like to ask? Yes, ma'am, question. Good evening, how are you? Great.
I noticed ever since I've been a diabetic for 15 years, I noticed I'm more depressed.
Okay.
I don't know the clinical thing or not, but most doctors, they told me that
Huh.
diabetes
That having diabetes gives a greater susceptibility to the idea of depression.
I see that.
Okay?
I take medication for it.
Okay. Yeah. And again, and thank you for saying that. Is there anything wrong with a Christian taking prescribed medication from a certified doctor in regard to dealing with depression? Absolutely not. It's the same as taking blood pressure medicine or other kinds of medication that you take for other conditions. And brethren, that's what we got to be sure that we understand that. I mean, as Brother Flatt said, there's a taboo, there's a bad understanding that some Christians have about other Christians being clinically depressed. Just like dealing with grief and just like dealing with cancer or dementia or any other situation, nobody volunteers for depression. Nobody. And we need to remember that. And we need to be very careful, and we need to be as non-judgmental as we possibly can be in trying to help our loved ones and our church members deal with an issue that is real. Yes, sir, Josh.
In trying to help somebody with depression or just being, do we treat depression like grief, just trying to be there for them, not offer advice, but what do we do?
Okay, Josh asked a great question. What do we do? In dealing with depression, do we deal with it just like we do in grief? Be there for them, help them, encourage them? That's a great start. I think a very important thing to do is to sit down, again, they've got to make the choice whether you're someone that they can talk to, that they can trust. But then you sit down with them and you let them, and you just say, what can I do to help you? I don't want to get in your way. I don't want to bother you. I don't want to bug you. But what can I do to help you? In a situation that I'm aware of, someone said, I don't like taking the medicine because the way sometimes it makes me feel. Would you please call me just to encourage me and check on me from time to time? And that individual said, yes, I'll be more than glad to do so. And the individual that asked for that said, okay, I promise I won't be ugly. I'll be encouraging. Well, they're doing pretty well. But see, they had someone on their side that agreed to be genuine and kind and loving and patient and long-suffering. And I think that's what we've got to be. Because again, depression is not something you can just, okay, take a pill and I'm finished, I'm good. It doesn't work that way. Yes, ma'am.
Since COVID started, that's the first question the doctors ask you when you go in. Are you depressed?
Exactly. Yeah, yes. Dealing with COVID, that's the first question that doctors ask. Okay? And there's, think about what COVID, particularly the first part. Now, again, you folks in Florida may have done it a little bit differently than I know you did it differently than we did in Alabama, because we got shut down, big time shut down, to the point that no church can meet it didn't matter whether you had 5 or 10 or what, you're closed down for a period of time then. And so everybody was isolated. And everybody, and it's easy when you're isolated and when you're quarantined. Remember that phrase? We're all quarantined inside. To start looking at those 4 walls, or even worse, to start looking around the people that you're dealing with and say, I kiddingly said that I told my wife one day, I really did, after about 4 months of 4 more months back in 2020, I said, well, I think we found out something. She said, what? I said, we found out that we can live together just like we've been doing for these past 43 years. And she said, yeah, what a joy. And that's the way she said it. And then she said, I think I'm going outside for a little bit. You just stay right here. Well, we kid ourselves, but sometimes you do need a change of place as well as space. Okay? But we need to be there for someone. And you're exactly right. COVID was not a friend at all to someone dealing with any kind of debilitating illness. I talked to my cancer folks that I deal with in counseling, and they just said it was so much harder to deal with their cancer during those times when they allowed no one into the institute to deal with treatments and other such things. It was just them and them alone. No one could allow to come in to talk with the doctor, to hear what the doctor said. Nothing. So it becomes a much harder situation. What else? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I have this problem. I don't know if it's depression, but I lost my mom to cancer on February 14th, which is Valentine's Day. And every year around about that time, it seems like it gets harder to get through that day, the February 14th. Once I get past that, then I'm good, but it just seems like every year, every February 14th, I really deep thinking about her. And it's kind of wild.
Well, I would be tempted to say that that's just a reminder of grief, because as Don said maybe Friday night, there's a constant battle between our head and our heart when it comes to grief. The head's going to say, you're not going to forget that date ever again because that date was important because someone you love passed. And the heart's going to say, oh no, not only are you going to forget that date, but you're going to mourn and you're going to think and you're going to be sorrowful for that time. So there's a constant situation there. Depression would have caused maybe some other things. That's just my personal opinion, but that's a great one. Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, can't you, in some way, you can overdo it by calling yourself trying to help somebody and just keep on at them
Yes, it's very, very possible to overdo in working with someone. How do you know the difference? Look at the results. Ask yourself the question, are they better or are they worse because of my interaction? How many minutes? 1 minute. Remember the questions I asked you at the very beginning to fill out? Your answer to those 3 questions will give you a real perspective on what a Christian who is depressed feels, what they believe, and what they need. Be sure that those answers are as accurate as possible based upon the circumstance you're dealing with that one person. It will be different with someone else because we're all different. And if you're dealing with someone that you love and that they love and trust you, you ask them those questions and let them give you their answers and see how close you are to understanding this very difficult phenomenon.